And I said, hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah. I said, hey, it's Rashida G. And I said, hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah. Well, I said, hey. Welcome to the crossroads. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Crossroads, or welcome to the Crossroads. This is a show for and about environmental justice and those who fight the fight with skin as melanated as the days are long. Knowledge is power, and we're breaking down stereotypes one episode at a time. Let's get the show started. Today, I am joined by Mr. Erik Range from Minorities for Medical Marijuana. I am going to try very hard to be serious, but no promises. Erik, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Rashida. We are, we can have some fun with it.
Thank God, because I'm not going to be able to keep it straight. I'm not. So,
Well, I was going to say, this is a topic that kind of invokes laughing. So, it is a very serious topic, and we'll be serious at times. But, it's one of those things that's lighthearted. So, we'll keep it light, too.
it was really great to meet you. We met in New Orleans on what felt like the hottest day ever. And I was so excited to see that you guys were out engaging in the community, engaging the population that had come and basically descended on New Orleans for Essence Festival. So talked about what M4MM, like the company, its origin story, and how you became affiliated.
Yeah, so Minorities for Medical Marijuana, or we go by M4MM, is often, we're called that often, but we started in 2016, and the founder of the organization, Roz McCarthy, actually is somebody who came to the industry as a non-consumer and, still very much is a non-consumer. But when she started the nonprofit, she did so because she knew at the time that this industry was taking off, and even though she wasn't a consumer, she recognized that her mother, who had passed away from breast cancer, and her father, who had lost his eyesight to glaucoma, and then eventually, kind of lost, or his mental capacity deteriorated over time as a result. She recognized that they could have had better end of life, quality of life at the end of their life had they had access to medical marijuana in a safe and responsible way. And, she also has a son who is a student right now in college, and he has sickle cell. And, so for her, she thought about the fact that we're now calling this a medicine, which it really and truly is a medicine. But, if we as a community don't participate in that conversation, then we're not going to ever get that information and that education to trickle into our community, so that folks like my mother, who's a diabetic, or my grandmother, and others who are ailing population in our communities, if they don't understand that they have access to cannabis as an option and a healthier alternative to some of the medications that they're being prescribed right now, then they're never going to take that chance. And so we're going to continue to see the quality of life for individuals in our community continue to go in the opposite direction, when the rest of the country is starting to move in a positive direction with this plant. So, she started the organization, and we have hit the ground running. We've written law in multiple states to, impact diversity and inclusion and social justice, social equity. We now have 25 chapters around the country, and we're growing by leaps and bounds. We have almost 400 members, or roughly 400 members in the organization, and it's all about making sure that minorities have a seat at the table, and that no part of this conversation, as this industry is coming online, no part of it will we be excluded from.
So what are some of the major barriers that inhibit minorities from either becoming able to be growers, actually wanting to grow the plant, or obtaining a medical card, if there are any. I know I'm familiar that with some of the barriers that prevent minorities from becoming growers, but I didn't know if there were any barriers for obtaining a card or at least having access to the information.
Yeah, so there's certainly, when you look at both of those situations, they both have their own set of unique challenges. But I think one that is that they share in terms of a barrier to this industry is the stigma that is so prevalent in our communities. When we think about the war on drugs, and we think about how it has completely destroyed our community. You'll be hard pressed to find very many minorities who haven't been impacted by the war on drugs in some way, whether it be a neighbor or a friend or a family member or somebody that they know who's been arrested or maybe even killed because of this war on drugs. That stigma is something that has to be overcome, and the way we do that is by educating. And so that's a common barrier that I think that really keeps us out of this industry. Another part of it from a patient side of it is lack of understanding of the plant. You can go to communities of color right now and find individuals who use weed or marijuana or the scientific name is cannabis, but our community, we understand it as weed. So reefer, right? It's so many other names, ganja. And it's important, to understand that about our communities. That's partly why we named the organization Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Although we know marijuana is a derogatory racial term, we understand that that's how our community understands the plant. If you go and talk about cannabis, they don't understand that. And so we'll miss a lot of people by not, using the same language that they understand. But going back to the challenges and the barriers, lack of education. We use it in our communities, but we do it primarily by self-medicating. And, that leads to us, using it in a way where we don't get the maximum benefit. And we don't understand how to use it to get the maximum benefit. So that's a challenge. When I think about folks like my mother, she never knew that she can go to a doctor and even ask the question about medical marijuana, because even though it was legal in our state, that information hadn't trickled down to our community. So she didn't know it was legal. She didn't know that we had dispensaries in our state. And so it was upon, that's why we take it upon ourselves to educate our communities in particular, because even once we have legalized it in states across the country, it takes a while for that information to get to our community and to really become prevalent, and then helping people to understand how do they access it in a safe manner. What does that cost look like? What does that conversation look like because on the medical marijuana side, you have to go to your doctor to get a recommendation. So how do you start that conversation? And that's kind of what our organization exists to do, is to help folks on that patient side. But then also, to answer the question on the other side from the business standpoint, it's much like any other industry: access to capital, and access to information. Many times, once again, we get the information too late. We may find out that there's an application process to get a license, but we may not find that out until 2 weeks before it's time to submit. And
right.
Typically it doesn't take, typically you need much longer in order to pull together your application. So, those are some of the barriers, the stigma that exists, the lack of information and education, the lack of access to capital. But really and truly, our community is fearful of this plant. We have a long history with this plant, but it's not been one that is very positive. So,
yes.
We're looking to change that.
Yeah, and that just, before I go to my next question, just for the listeners, there's a really great book called Locking Up Our Own. I'm going to blink on the guy's name, but I will put a link to the book with the resources. But that gives a really comprehensive history of really just the internal struggle with drugs that Black legislators have fought and faced. And really, it was basically ushered in the era of the war on drugs. And just because there was so much correlation between, marijuana and heroin, unfortunately, which we can get into because, as you're aware, it's a Schedule 1 substance, just the same way that they both are Schedule 1 substances. But, that's just a really interesting book and a good read. So if folks want to check it out, I definitely recommend it. But back to M for MM. So what do you guys do to overcome these barriers that are inhibiting people from either getting a medical marijuana card, or just, wanting to become a grower if that's of their interest?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you another resource for your audience to go check out. If you have Netflix, just look up The Grass is Greener.
Yes.
The Grass is Greener is such a, they did, my hat's off to that entire production team. Mm-hmm. They did a really, really good job of not just going through the history, but really showing the impact of the history of the war on drugs on our communities and how it was so pervasive throughout our community in many different areas, from housing discrimination to employment to the criminal justice side of things. So, definitely check that out. I recommend it to you all. And that kind of dovetails right into, your question, how do we overcome these barriers? Well, our organization at this point probably, and I haven't fact checked this, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we are, the largest producer of content and information in this space for our communities across the country. We touch right now roughly 1 million. Our reach is roughly 1 million on social media every month.
Wow.
So we have really taken to educating our community at every turn that we can. Partly how you and I met. We were at Essence Festival. We know that the black purse strings of our community, or the purse strings of the black community, is at Essence, Festival. Yep. And so we understand that if we're going to get our community to buy into this, we have to go to where they are. And so, we were there, and very much in like a guerrilla marketing, tactic, if you will, holding signs, passing out free samples, just talking to anybody.
Free samples of what?
Of CBD. Yeah. We had
You
CBD.
didn't give me any CBD.
Oh, I'm so sorry,
Eric.
We had,
God.
that was one of the things that we
your
brought
own
out there.
People.
It's always your own people, holding out on you. But
holding out.
We had it was pretty awesome, actually. Before we went out there, we knew that folks are starting to hear the medical marijuana conversation. They're hearing the conversation about recreational, but over the last 2 years, CBD has really exploded into the market, and so we know that many more people are hearing about CBD than even medical marijuana programs now. And so we wanted to make sure that our community understood what it was, how it works, and how it may be beneficial to them. And so we put out a call to action to some of the companies in this space, and we asked them to donate products to us. And they donated some Slavs and some bottled waters and some lip gloss and some other things. And we just, kind of gave it out as, a way to get people to come in and listen to the conversation. So, we those are, the ways that we overcome it. Education and information is going to be by far the best way that we can empower our communities to be active in this industry and to be successful. But we do all types of things. We're a membership-based organization, so we invite people to become a member. And again, we don't want to create another barrier to entry. So our membership fee is $100 a year, which is I'm pretty sure the lowest in the industry in terms
that's
of membership.
Cheaper than Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. It's cheap.
Just paid Netflix today, and I was like, fine, here you go.
I think we're gonna have to use that as a slogan. Cheaper.
Yeah,
than Netflix,
cheaper than Netflix, girl.
No, seriously, and we do that because again, we want folks to have some skin in the game, but we don't want to create another reason for folks not to get in. So, but and we do all kinds of things. So, for instance, just this past weekend, I was in New Jersey at the NECAN conference, which is New England Cannabis Conference, which now travels throughout the Northeast, and they were in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and we were fortunate enough to partner with them, and they gave us some scholarship passes to give away to minorities and folks who may not be able to afford the price of going to the conference. And so we try to cut through that red tape for folks in our community. We try to remove the barriers that are there so that they can continue their education, so that they can learn as much as they can and take that back to their community, and hopefully in some way, get involved. That may mean starting a business, but that may also mean just educating their family to get, their family, involved on the medicinal side of, becoming patients. We approach it from a very holistic standpoint. We believe in advocacy. We believe in, being, on the grassroots. So in our chapters, we identify individuals in those communities who have a stake where they live, of making sure that we get this right. And so through that partnership, we've been able to see a lot of success.
So one question that I have, kind of shifting back a little bit, talking about, so if the laws, as we know, like federally, like marijuana is illegal, but the state laws obviously have very much so changed, and there's a growing interest in America for legalization of weed. But there is a difference
in the world, not just here.
Yeah,
I mean,
right,
Africa is exploding as well,
yeah.
in other continents.
Everybody wants
But go
Gorilla
ahead.
Glue. I get it. Yeah, but like, what? I told you I'm not going to be able to keep it straight. I'm not. It's too easy. But like, what is the difference between decriminalization, and legalization? Because as I'm looking, I'm seeing that some states things are like certain things are legal, like CBD oil is legal, but not fully, and it's maybe decriminalized, but that doesn't mean that it's legal.
Right. So there's a whole lot to chew there, so I'm going to try to be as concise as I can. Do it. So we have we still at the federal level have a prohibition to marijuana. Okay. But if you understand that our country operates as a federalist country, we have a separation between state and the federal government, and that was done purposely by our founders, so that states could control things for their own, I guess, territories, if you will. So here I am in the state of Florida. We want to keep things to some degree localized in that conversation at the local level. And so one of the things that states have always been able to kind of control is healthcare. And so when we saw the state of California in the late 90s go past medical marijuana, they did so under the guise of their ability to control their healthcare program, the right to try, giving their patients the right to try medical marijuana. But even before we go there, if you want to rewind all the way back to the late 1930s when prohibition actually began. At the time, before then, the federal government used to actually pay farmers to grow industrial hemp. And we made a lot of different things. Oh, yes. And hemp is, again, there's some distinction there. But hemp and cannabis is essentially, all of it is cannabis. All of it is cannabis. But if you think about the plant that we, I guess, roll into a joint and get high with, we'll call that marijuana, per se, sure, okay? Yes. But when we think about, that same cannabis plant that we could grow, and then we can take those fibers and, say, make ship sails or make ropes or, make other textiles and products, that is what we deem hemp, okay? Now, there really is no scientific difference between the plant other than you have different genetic strands that kind of dictate what you get back. But the federal government gave a legal definition between hemp and cannabis as hemp being anything below 0.3% of THC. Okay, so if it has less than 0.3% THC, then it's designated as hemp. Anything above that is designated as marijuana. Okay. So that is one of the things that that distinction was made. But back in 1937, they lumped it all together That's where the term marijuana came into play. They needed to create a term and associate it with Hispanics and with African Americans to demonize it. That was the only way that people who had been smoking it, and again, all races used it, but in order to demonize it, they needed to paint somebody as a bad guy. And so in 1937, when we outlawed it, they outlawed everything: marijuana, hemp, the whole nine. And so the cultivation of it came to an end, as well as the manufacturing of products came to an end. Now, we've always still been able to import hemp-based products. That's why you can go into your Whole Foods and buy a hemp shampoo or a hemp lotion or hemp seeds and those type of things. So we've always been able to import that. Now we're changing the laws, and we have, there's a distinction between your medical marijuana program, which many states have kind of started down that path. And medical marijuana allows the state, or many states have created programs that allow for you as a patient to go to your doctor and for certain conditions receive a card or authorization, a recommendation to go into a dispensary and purchase medical marijuana for your treatment. Okay, that's the medical marijuana side of it. Colorado became the grand social experiment when they became a recreational state, meaning they decided and said, you know what, we think adults are, smart enough to choose whatever they, or they should be able to use whatever they want to use. And, we put certain parameters in place to make sure that kids are safe and that we're caring for the public safety. But, consenting adults should be able to do whatever they want, just like they can go in and purchase, a bottle of alcohol and go home and consume it within certain parameters. So that's how the recreational side of things came online. Then you had, folks who saw the recreational side, who saw the medical marijuana side, and because these are regulated parts of the industry, it's expensive. To be compliant with regulation costs money. That means you have to, have attorneys in place. That means you have to have certain operating procedures in place, and so it kind of takes it from this, regular small, in your kitchen type operation to a more, legitimized, licensed business. And when you're thinking about when you're thinking about medicine, we want that. We want there to be some very strict guidelines and rules over the people who are creating things that we're calling medicine. Because if we don't, then people may use pesticides, they may use other types of things, they may grow in soils that have heavy metals, and eventually we're doing ourselves more harm than we're doing good. So we want and need regulation, smart regulation in place in order to make sure that folks are getting good, clean medicines. But all of that still operates under this federal prohibition. Okay, and so I guess the most important thing I would want your listeners to know is this. We will eventually legalize. What that looks like, I'm not 100% sure, because there's a lot of different bills and a lot of different, potentials for what that may turn around and look like. But what most folks should understand is that our federal government right now has a stance, even though it is illegal at the federal level. They have had a hands-off approach when coming into states who have created what they say, and this came into place under the Obama administration. You had the Department of Justice. They wrote what was called the Cole Memo. And basically what they said was, if your state has a robust regulatory structure in place, we will not come in and prosecute and arrest those those organizations that you have licensed to do this. Okay? They are also saying in that we're not going to come lock up your patients, that you give the authority to do that. This is why states create these rules and say only people can get access to medical marijuana are those who meet these set of criteria. And some states are more conservative in that than others, but because of that, need to have a robust regulatory structure in place, that's where those rules come. Okay. Now, so that was under the Obama administration. They said, we're going to take a hands-off approach. We're going to let you guys go. Now, what also happened under the Obama administration at the federal level is Congress passed what they call the Rohrabacher Amendment. And Rohrabacher Amendment basically stripped away the enforcement budget from the Department of Justice for states for medical marijuana. So again, if states had this robust regulatory structure in place, the Department of Justice no longer had any budget to go in and crack down on those organizations that were licensed legally in that state. Okay. You
So what
fast
kind
forward
of-
to Trump
sorry.
coming into office.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I told
Lord.
you it's a lot. I'm trying to cover quite a bit in a concise way.
Keep
But,
going. It's fine.
Fast forward, Trump comes into office. Jeff Sessions becomes the
Colonel Sanders.
he becomes our new attorney general, and then he immediately rescinds the Cole Amendment, which again said if you have this robust regulatory structure, we're going to leave you alone. So the industry began to, get a little worried and thinking that the federal government was now changing its policy and was going to begin enforcing the laws that were already on the books, right? But then you had Congress tighten down even more, and they voted to extend the Rohrabacher Amendment, again, stripping that budget away from the Justice Department. So even though we had an attorney general who wanted to come in, they could only come in under certain situations and under certain, issues because their budget no longer existed for that. So although we don't have legalization at the federal level, because of the way that our government is kind of operating hands off, at the state level, you're not in jeopardy so much. Now, I'm doing my little bunny rabbit ears here because that does not mean that we're not in jeopardy. And in fact,
Right.
Minority communities, we continue to be targeted, as this happens, as states legalize. And so, going back to your initial question about the difference between decriminalization and legalization, when you have at the federal level it being illegal, individual states and individual counties have done what they call decriminalization. And what they say is, we're going to take this from being a criminal matter, and now it is a civil matter. Okay?
Uh-huh.
So we're no longer going to automatically arrest you if you're caught with cannabis in your possession. Now, they still leave a lot of discretion up to the officer. And again, these bunny rabbit ears are going off over here. Discretion can be used, for the good or for the bad. So far, we have not seen that discretion really be lended to individuals in our community. We still continue to get arrested for it. But under decriminalization, the officer has the discretion to arrest, which should be the last option in this case now, or to give a citation. So just like you would get a moving, violation if you were pulled over for speeding, you would get a ticket. And on your first offense, in some states, and typically they, like here in Florida, is if you're caught with less than 20 ounces. Okay. Now, and that's less than 20 grams. That's less.
I was gonna say that's a
1
lot.
ounce. Yeah,
I was like,
I'm
Jesus
so sorry.
Christ. I was like,
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a whole.
And I'm just
lot.
like, yeah.
Yeah. As long as you have less than 20 grams, you are, the officer can give you a ticket versus arresting. Now, and that number at 20 grams fluctuates. Some people go up as high as 1 ounce, which is 28 grams. And others have gone out to, I think in Jamaica, they decriminalized up to 2 ounces or something like that. So, that fluctuates different places. But full legalization would remove it from the schedule of drugs altogether. So it wouldn't be a schedule. I'm sorry, it would reschedule. In some forms of decriminalization, it would reschedule it to, say, a Schedule 2 or a Schedule 4, which is, more in line with, say, your Tylenols and those type of things. But then there's certainly those who are advocating to have it completely removed from the schedule, and you'd be able to treat it much like you would treat growing a tomato or vegetable in your backyard. So we may get to that point, we may not. I think what's important for our community to understand is that we don't get the fullest safety of the law until it is fully legalized. Because under decriminalization, that discretion doesn't tend to play out in our favor. Right. Nor have we seen cities and states put any dollars or resources towards retraining and retooling officers on how to enforce that decriminalization. So we got a lot. I know I said a whole lot that, but I hope that somebody heard, a nugget or two in there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then something I want to talk about specifically for Florida, because you all recently, and I'm probably going to get the wording wrong, so help me. But basically, you have it so that the major thing that I was really proud of for Florida is first that they're allowing returning citizens, folks who spent time behind bars, allowing them to still be registered to vote. Is that correct?
That was that was a recent amendment that passed. Yes.
And then another piece, and I think I've got this, but I think they're starting to decriminalize marijuana offenses in Florida as well, right? Oh God! See, here we go. Come on.
Yeah. So what I'll say is this, and the two are actually separate. The restorative rights. I think it was called Restorative Rights Act, and I don't quote me on that one. But
that's okay.
Giving felons back their right to vote and everything. That was something that was completely separate from the industry push, if you will, and the advocacy that was taking place from the cannabis industry side of things. That was just something that the legislators here in Florida, really got together and fought hard for. Now, when we talk about cannabis in the state of Florida, it becomes a very different conversation. We have decriminalized at the local level. Many of our cities and municipality and counties have, decriminalized. There's still some who have not, but we have yet to get an actual hearing for a bill in our legislature. Over the last, we became a medical marijuana state in 2014. Here we are in 2019, getting ready to approach the 2020 legislative session. And every year that we have put forth a decriminalization bill, it does not make it to a committee hearing at all. So we now there is one that has just been introduced by Representative Chevron Jones, who we work very, very, very closely with here. He's been a staunch advocate for the industry and just been a major supporter of the organization from day one. So he has put forth out a decriminalization bill, which would decriminalize for the entire state. But I can tell you, my actual rep, for where I live, has put forth a decriminalization bill the last 3 years and has yet to get a hearing. So I'm hopeful, but I'm also, I understand the state that I live in, and we take the small wins where we can get them, and we continue, to push forward. But we also we believe in holding our government accountable, but we also believe in holding the industry folks accountable as well. So we work with and challenge the license holders in our state to do the right thing. Sponsor expungement clinics. Do education events in our communities. Hire folks from our communities. Operate your businesses. Set up your warehouses and stuff in our. So that we can get access to those jobs. So,
right.
Certainly we have to be politically involved and activated, but we also, there's a lot of money being made. So those folks need to be good stewards of the industry as well.
Yeah, put a pin in that because we're coming to that next. But one thing that I wanted to highlight, because that's what made me even more excited to have you on the podcast, is that M4MM has legal counseling or legal services as a part of your platform, where you guys help folks who have previously been arrested for marijuana violations and helping them to get that expunged from their record. And I just, in my spare time, I'm, obviously I do a lot of work with mass incarceration. So that was a big deal. And I really wanted to uplift that, because I just think that's part and parcel and central to the work that has to be done to establish equity in the marijuana industry.
Oh,
That was just more like a
absolutely.
statement.
Yeah, no, and it's so true. We have to do those things. And one of my, I guess, mentors, if you will, never met him before, but James Baldwin is someone I just look up to, and he gave a
Me
speech,
too.
decades ago about how, in this country, if we don't realize that African Americans aren't wards of the state or orphans, but the very people who built the fabric of this country, until we realize that, then we're always going to have a problem, because by our exclusion of those same people from the actual system, their very existence, threatens the system. And so I say the same thing when I'm talking to folks in the cannabis industry. We can choose to ignore individuals who've been locked up or selling, weed in the streets for decades. We can ignore them, but to our own apparel. We jeopardize the industry by not finding ways to right the wrongs of the past and to create a space, for them to be able to get to the front of the line, which is where you get the social equity programs that are out there. But those things are absolutely imperative. I wish we could have a greater conversation about that here in my state. But again, we're very much a part of that Southern politics belt, if you will.
Yeah.
So certain conversations are a little bit more challenging to have in different places. But as an organization, it's something we're committed to. We have introduced appropriations requests at the state level to be able to do this. Do expungements, and not just expungements, because it's important to kind of get people back on the right footing,
Right.
in terms of their records. But many times they need other services, wraparound services as well. So, that's what our project Clean Slate is all about. It's not just doing the expungement, but also making sure that, if someone needs some mental health counseling, or they need some, some guidance in finding, finding that through a faith-based initiative, or, helping folks to get some soft employment skills. Those are the type of things that we need to be doing, because it's not just that we arrested folks. We took them out of
No.
the society for
Yes.
a number of years,
And
so
strip them of their
you know,
rights.
exactly. So we got a lot of work to repair that. But and I think that's the responsibility of not just our government. I'm one of those people. I'm a staunch independent. So I like to see both government and private business come together and work together to fix the problems that we have. So I believe that the industry has just as much a responsibility to right those wrongs as the government does as well.
So we're at the point where of the show where I call it the crossroads, where we kind of bring everything that we've been talking about together. And I think the best way to do that is to talk about equity, which is what we've been alluding to, what we've been discussing. But like, how do we as a people make their marijuana industry more equitable? I understand that there are obviously a lot of barriers. There's barriers for obtaining license, being able to a medical marijuana license for your own personal use. There's barriers getting the information to become a licensed grower. So what are the things that people can do in their own communities to continue the work of making the marijuana industry equitable for all minorities and people?
I have to thank you so much for that question, and not just for asking it, but the way that you asked it. You phrased it in the way of putting the onus on us and putting it on our community, and I agree. We are owed a lot. Our
Yeah.
communities have been destroyed. I agree. But I'm the last person to sit here and wait on someone to give us anything. We
can't
have to
wait.
take what is right, and so the way that you phrase that in terms of putting the onus on us to do something to make this more equitable, I think is such a key way of looking at it. If we wait on them and the system, if you will, to create that space, or if we wait on the system to educate us, we're going to be waiting forever. We have to take the initiative to at the very least become more knowledgeable about it. When we were out at Essence, someone, walked past me and made, a little comment about what we were talking about and were doing. And obviously they did not support, cannabis, and which I have no problem with. It's not for everybody in that regard. But what I turned around and I said to that person was, so you mean to tell me that because you don't want someone smoking it, you can't get behind supporting our people not getting arrested because of it?
Good job.
That was something, and they stopped and they turned back around and they came and they talked to me for a few minutes because they understood that whether they want somebody smoking it or not is one thing. Whether they want somebody to go to jail for it is an entirely different, conversation and something that they can get behind. So,
right.
We have to take the initiative to go out and learn about it. We have to take the initiative to learn about the industry and recognize that, when we think about this industry, the first things we think about is being a grower or having a dispensary. But trust me when I say that is literally not even scratching the surface of this industry. And if all we do is focus on that, then we're going to miss the real opportunities that are there. We are currently right now in our neighborhoods, we create products. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I know in my own neighborhood that, has a little fruit drink that they're making at home, or, they're making some lotions and hair, creams and
shea
stuff
butter.
like that. Shea butters and stuff. Those are the types of products that we need to, begin to learn how this plant could potentially add value to those products and how we can begin to, scale those beyond just our, tiny market and into, a more larger scalable business. And so that's why we do things like a boot camp to help people get ready. We did it in Missouri where we did a cannabis business licensing boot camp, helping people understand, okay, how do I write this application? What components do I need to consider when I'm pulling all of this together? Going back to the question in terms of what we can do is simply, recognizing that nobody is going to give us anything about this. They're not going to give us the information, and they're not going to give us the medicine, and they're not going to give us the money. We have to go and get it, and it's there for us to go get. But right. we have to be activated, independently, aside from the rest of the industry.
Okay, so now I got the serious questions out the way. I want to ask one kind of foolish question. So, like, if we're legalizing right now, what's going to happen to like all the cartels who have been digging tunnels and things and bringing that stuff? Like, what's going to happen? Like, what are they going to? Are they just going to move on to another
like
drug?
The cartels and? You mean like cartels in like Colombia and stuff like that?
Yeah. What's going to happen?
Well, they're going to
Best
just
guess.
wash their money and start. I assume they're going to just wash their money and start a legal business with it and still sell whatever illegal activities they were going to do. I don't have a good answer for that one. I think that and the reason why I say that is because I was actually just in Jersey and I was talking to a guy, and he was straight up with me. He was like, "Listen, I've been selling in the streets for decades." And it's like, and and I'm comfortable. I'm good. I'm not trying to get into the legal side of it. Yeah, he's good. And what I shared with him was, I get it. You're good. You might not want to go pay. Here in Florida, the application fee is $60,000. So you might
Excuse me?
For the medical marijuana side. Now that won't be the same for hemp and for recreational, but for medical marijuana, absolutely $60,000 just for the application fee.
Grow it?
What I shared with him, right? To grow, yes.
You have to sell it illegally first.
Exactly. Now that's Florida. Not everywhere is like that. Okay. You have other places. The licenses fee, like in North Carolina when they opened up their hemp program, their pilot program. I think it was like $200, $300 for the application. Out in California for the recreational side of it, I think it might be $5,000, $10,000. So it can fluctuate. Again, every state has a very different way of going about it. Florida just happens to be one that wanted to lock a lot of people out, so we just raised the money, but we also did that because in order to sustain the budget for the office that oversees the program, they need a pretty high application fee because they don't tax it here. We don't tax medical marijuana because we don't tax medicine, so it's considered a medicine, so it doesn't get taxed. So it doesn't generate any revenues for the state to be able to shore up the program. So again, it's all that's all politics. That's all I know a lot of advocates will have different ways of viewing even that, not taxing it versus taxing it. But there's so many different ways of doing it. But what I share with that guy who was good in the streets is I need him to get out of the streets. I need him to become a part of the legal movement because, what he was saying is that, because of how things are, how expensive it is in the legal market, it only pushes people to the black market, which is true.
Right.
And I get that. But what I also shared with him was in a state like Florida where the licenses, I told you $60,000 was the application fee. Now, some people have spent upwards of $1 million just to pull together everything they need to submit the application, everything from consultants, lawyers, real estate, the whole nine. So, say you paid $1 million for the application. We've had many of the licenses here in Florida sell for more than $50 million. Okay, so we're talking millionaires have been born in my state already, and we're a young program. So what I shared with that gentleman was, listen, if you don't think that the state at some point is going to have to aggressively defend the legal market, which means shutting down the black market, creating tougher and stricter laws for people who are caught in the black market, then you're not reading the tea leaves. You know what I mean? You have to realize that no state is going to allow, for investors to put $50 million into a business and they not protect that business.
Right.
It's just dollars and cents at that point. So, the cartels, they're different. They have their own money, but in terms of people from our neighborhoods who've been in the streets selling it, I caution you. I want you to find ways to get into the legal market. I don't know how. I don't know what that answer is or what that looks like or how they do it. But I do think that we will see tougher laws in the coming years. Because they're going to have to protect these businesses.
This episode of The Crossroads is brought to you by none other than the hardworking and ever vigilant Minorities for Medical Marijuana. They have several amazing programs such as Health is Wealth, Cannabis and CBD Education and Training, Project Clean Slate with expungement clinics for those with marijuana possession charges, and Latinx community outreach. Their membership is cheaper than Netflix, and you will have access to their boundless resources. So, visit Minorities that's the number 4, medicalmarijuana.org. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram, and join a chapter in your area. Once again, Minorities, the number 4, medicalmarijuana.org. Let's get back to the show. Okay, so your favorite strains. Hit it.
All right, my favorite strain, number one that I could call off the top of my head is Blue Dream. I love Blue Dream. It's a nice hybrid, so you get both some of that indica and the sativa in there as well. Pretty much everything that I like is some type of, hybrid. Like, I don't like anything that's too heavy indica, which will make me want to go sit down and go to sleep.
Go to bed.
Right, and sometimes with sativas, they can be a bit of a head rush for me, and it could, lead to a sinus headache and sinus pressure for me because I have issues with my sinuses. So I like a nice little balance where I get a little bit of the head high and as well as the body high as well. But especially when it comes to like aches and pains. I like something that's going to give me a nice full body, high.
So speaking of body highs, what is it with edibles? Because like I've seen things that say that in some states, I can't say precisely how many, that they are illegal because there's not, I guess there's no clarity on how they can be regulated. Is that true?
Well, there's a lot that we don't know about edibles, and in terms of well, let me not say that we don't know about it. When I say we don't know about it, meaning the federal government hasn't funded some research, that would say that we quote unquote have the information. Anecdotally, we know, as well as individuals who have done it, just on their own, and companies who have, spent the last few years learning a tremendous amount about it. But when you get into edibles, you have to, really get into dosing and understanding how much is in even each. I mean, like if you think of a brownie, how much is the full brownie going to be, worth, and then how much is it going to be if it's just the like a quarter of the brownie, so it's about understanding that whole what they would say bioavailability of the product, because when you're putting it in food, that may change quite a bit, as well as the onset time. When we talk about edibles, it passes through your body differently than when you are vaping or smoking. When when you're vaping and smoking, it goes directly into your blood system. But when you are and it's metabolized by your lungs. But when you eat or you consume cannabis orally, in that way, is metabolized by your liver. When you're eating an edible or something like that, and so the onset time can be anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. And this is where people get into trouble, because you take that little crumb, of the brownie, and like, oh, I don't feel anything.
Oh,
and
my
then
God.
you take
Infamous
more,
last
and
word.
I still don't feel anything. And then you take more, and then, a couple hours later, you are like, hit by a train with this kind of, crazy high. And that's the thing about it. And as well as when it's, again, metabolized through your liver, it actually, the high lasts much longer. So, it'll be much more intense, much more, longer for individuals. So you have to be careful with that, because that could give you an adverse effect. I give you a case in point. While on vacation out in Colorado, I was around some folks, and somebody had taken an edible and they started to hallucinate. Or at least that was their description of what was happening to them. And it was just something, and I hope their friends, got them some help and got them to, calm down or whatever the case may be. But, but it's funny because it's one of those things where, like, most times when we think about edibles, we think about it being put in sweets. And what does sweets encourage you to do? Keep eating. Eat more. Man.
So then,
and so it becomes a big risk factor. But I mean, you have everything. Like, I mean, I've gone to 5-course, very fine, fine cuisine, high end cuisine that was infused with cannabis and so on. And so, but again, they took dosing very, very seriously. And so, over the course of 7, or over 7 courses, you probably didn't get more than 30 milligrams of THC. So, we have to be responsible with it. We have to tell people what's in it, how to use it. And that's where, it gets a little tricky. And then, when you think about products that are going to be, used for, to be sold in stores and in the market, then we have to be, careful and make sure that we aren't causing some type of public risk by allowing people to, cook up a batch of, infused lemonade in their tub. We want to make sure there's some standards that are being followed in that. So, again, I know that regulation sometimes can be the enemy, but it is also there in many cases to be, to safeguard us as consumers, so that we know that we can get consistency in our products. And because, again, if you go to the medical side of things, medical marijuana should be as consistent as your Advil. And think about that. You know, you live in one state, I live in another state. I may have a CVS, you may have a Rite Aid. But if we go into both of our stores and we pick up Advil, we pretty much have come to expect a certain level of consistency no matter where we are in that product, correct?
Right.
And so that's where we have a long way to go before we're there with cannabis. But that is the hope, you know, that we will know our products so well, and the manufacturing processes will get better and better, even when it comes to edibles, to where we know exactly how to consume, and we can do it responsibly, and if we're doing it from a medical standpoint, so that we're able to get the maximum benefit.
I was going to tell a really funny story when I was in college, but I'm kind of chickening out. I might tell it later. But
was it with the edible?
Oh yeah. Because
you know, and it's different for everybody. Like, edibles don't do much for me. I get a good night's sleep, but I don't ever, you know, for me, I don't get excited about edibles for two reasons. One, I have yet to have a actual feeling of being high after ingesting edible, as well as most edibles are only focused on sweets. My mother's a diabetic. You know, it was a pretty traumatic experience when she was diagnosed. So to me, I'm not going to get excited about gummies and, you know, cookies and brownies and all of that, you know. So, but again, I think that's, you know, areas where we can continue to grow in the industry and, you know, find other ways and products to infuse.
So I made okay, all right. So fine, I'll tell you the story, because it's the exact opposite of putting it in something sweet. So we had some weed left over, and I was like, man, I'm really tired of smoking this. So I got it in my mind that I was going to make edibles of some type. So my friend, I was at my friend's house, and all she had was a Jiffy cornbread mix. So, so I go into the kitchen and I put the weed in some butter and I sauteed it, because I'm Jamie Oliver and none of y'all can tell me shit. So I did that, and then took the butter and the sauteed, God knows what it was, blueberry yum or whatever, put it in the mix, mixed it all together, and baked it in the oven. Now,
the herb included, so the flour is still in
yeah.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know what I was doing.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea. It just looked smart at the time. Okay. So baked it in the oven. All right. So I pull them out. They smelled terrible, and it didn't rise. It just looked flat and kind of browned on the top. Okay, it's fine. I was young, all right? You know, you're not going to judge me, Eric. You're not going to judge me, damn
it. No, I will judge you depending on how you answer this question.
Okay.
Did you guys eat what you made?
Yes. So here's what happened, because this is like the worst part. So I ate a little bit, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is disgusting. Like, that's the first off top. It was the nastiest shit I'd ever eaten. I was like, this shit nasty. But I was like, but then it started to kick in. You gotta finish it, though. And I was like, yo, I'm kind of hungry. And then so I proceeded to eat more. 30 minutes later, I can't function because I'm higher than giraffe ass. So, and it lasted for hours. I was high for hours. And this is like right around when like Chappelle's show was out. So we were like, for hours, you know, like the crackhead on the show or whatever. So foolishness. So, if your mother is interested, I will be more than happy to saute some.
And you know, the crazy part is, so you didn't know what you were doing, but it was very clear you didn't know what you were doing. But
no idea.
One of the things about when making edibles, there is a very distinct process that you want to go through. Part of that process is what they call decarbonization. I think I'm sure I'm butchering that, but decarb, right, is the short. And essentially what it is, when the cannabis plant is grown, the THC that is in the plant in its flower state is not active. it's not active at all. So if you were to take that plant in order to activate it, and so in that state, the compound is actually THCA. It has an A on it, so like a little hyphen A. But in order to activate it and then turn it into delta 9 THC, which is where we get the high from, it has to be heated to a certain degree, and in order to activate it. And so when you sauteed it, you activated it. However,
oh my God.
What you didn't do is you actually did not infuse your butter with that. You actually got high from the actual ingestion of the flour because you activated it. But sauteing it, I'm certain you didn't leave it on the stove very long.
No.
So you actually didn't infuse at all. And it takes some time. You need so butter is a good solvent because butter has the fatty tissues that the THC likes to bond to. So, butter is definitely one of the more favorite ways that people create edibles. But it takes anywhere from 3 hours to 4 hours, depending on. Now they have machines.
Anybody had that kind of time?
Yeah, exactly. A magical butter machine now you can do it in much less time, and so the technology has caught up. But essentially, you would take that butter. And let it boil, or you put it in like a double boiler and let it cook for some time, and then your butter you put it in your refrigerator, let it harden, and you'll have butter. And typically then you would take your cornbread recipe, make it exactly how you would use it, how you normally would, just substituting your butter that you were putting instead of putting regular butter, you would put your now infused butter. But you put your butter was infused with flour is what it was.
Yeah. It was disgusting. I'm talking about, I was like, this shit is nasty. And I was like, this is why they put it in brownies. It was disgusting. It was horrible.
But, and the flavor of it is actually not that, palatable for most people. It's actually, even when it's done properly, it's not the greatest flavor. So people have to do things to mask the flavor and kind of change, people's mind about it, if you will.
So that's my embarrassing story from college when I made weed biscuits.
That's hilarious, by the
way. Thank you. Wasn't my shining moment, clearly, but at least I had the wherewithal to saute it. I thought I was doing big shit. I was like, saute it. I was like, yeah, cooking in here. You can't chef butter. You can't tell me shit, and then all to find out. This was a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea. But I had to see it through to the end, Eric,
Hey, we're not going to call it terrible. You know what we're going to call it?
What?
We're going to call it research and development.
Yes. R&D.
Right there.
Yeah. I love that. Makes me feel so much better. Thank you. That was a dark period in my life. Dark period in my development. It was really bad.
Oh, okay. Boy. That's hilarious.
Thank you for letting me, because that's I don't tell too many. I don't get to tell that story too often, but when I do, people always hysterically laugh at me and they're like, I cannot believe you did that. And I'm like, listen, I was 19, I didn't know any better, and I was like, let's just see what happens here. And I got a funny story out of it. But Eric, I have to thank you so much. You really took a chance on me, being a part of my podcast. I think by the time I'd met you, I'd had maybe 5 episodes ready to go, that I'd completed and edited in the whole 9 yards, and you still were willing to be a part of this, and I really, really appreciate it. So before I let you go, plug M4MM. Tell people how they can get in, maybe not in touch with you personally, but reaching out to the organization, how they can get involved, where they can follow you, any events that you've got coming up, what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you, for inviting me to be a guest and allowing me to be on the platform. As I shared with you before, it's a passion to make sure that we have this conversation and that it trickles down into our community. So I appreciate you for all that you're doing and, just being a voice and introducing this subject matter to your audience. So thank you for that. And Minorities for Medical Marijuana, we can be found all over. You can find us on the internet. Our website is M4MM m4mmunited.org. So m4mmunited.org. You can also find us on social media, M4MM United. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We have a Facebook page for all of our different chapters. So we have our main Minorities for Medical Marijuana Facebook page, as well as, for each of the different states. So Illinois has a page, as well as Florida, as well as New Jersey. So you can get more local information and connect with people more locally. But definitely, we invite you all to become a member. Like I said, it's $100 a year, cheaper than Netflix. We invite you to become a member and really start your journey in this space. Start your learning and get educated. Connect with other minority professionals around the country who are all looking to get into this industry, or they have already taken the leap of faith. But we always say, when you find M for MM, you have found your tribe. So we welcome you all to the tribe.
Thank you all for joining me again for another episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. During the Crossroads, we talked about the ways the Black community could empower itself to create equity in the marijuana industry. Now, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't work the legislative process. We should be engaging in lobbying, testifying at public hearings, requesting formal legislation any way we can so that we can push towards legalization. And this just also doesn't undermine the disparities economically that our community faces. So I just wanted to make that clear, that in the course of the conversation, yes, I wanted to know what we could do community-wise to create equity for ourselves, but I am also well aware that that's not the only approach. So just wanted to put that out. So on the next episode, I'm talking to the founder of the Black Sustainability Summit. So the summit is being held online this year, and we're going to get all of the details in the next episode. Again, guys, thank you so much for joining me. See you next time.